goes, well, hey, tonight's about me, man, not your f***ing hip.
He wasn't fake. He didn't play the game. If Eddie Van Halen didn't like you, he made sure the world knew, and once that line was crossed, there was no getting back.
Because I was ready to, you know, it's like all those years were right there. And I just said, if you ever speak to me like that again, you better be wearing a cup.
Guitar legend, studio wizard, relentless perfectionist. Eddie Van Halen wasn't just a revolutionary, he was a sniper with opinions. And when it came to music, he didn't tolerate fluff, fakery, or frontmen who thought ego could replace talent. For over 4 decades, he rewrote the rules. But behind every song, solo, and stadium was something deeper. A radar for bullshit. A filter for what didn't belong. If you were fake, loud, lazy, or just didn't get it, he heard it, he saw it, and he hated it. He didn't argue, he dismissed, and when Eddie dismissed you, it echoed. Van Halen, Michael Jackson, Limp Bizkit, Kiss, even his own bandmates. The hate wasn't random, it was razor sharp. And when Eddie locked in on someone he couldn't stand, he didn't need to raise his voice. The words cut deeper when they came quiet.
You just want to break some shit. You feel me? To live an empty hand.
As soon as I saw Van Halen, I went backstage and cornered the guys. They were about to sign with a yogurt manufacturer, and I said, don't do it.
For the audience to make a choice. You have to either love us and hate him or vice versa.
So you like what you're doing now?
Well, that's what I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
And when Eddie really spoke his mind, the target list got short and savage.
I think we just change, you know? I hate to call it mature or anything like that.
He respected mastery, but if you brought nothing to the table, no soul, no substance, Eddie walked, or fired back. Here are the 6 musicians he couldn't stand, and the reasons why no apology ever followed. Number 1. David Lee Roth. Some bands split over money. Van Halen split because David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen were never built for the same orbit. Eddie was about precision. Roth was all flash. One chased tone, the other chased the spotlight. And when that dynamic finally cracked, it didn't just fall apart, it shattered. I'm not in this band to play music, I'm in it to cause a ruckus. To Eddie, that wasn't clever. It was exactly the problem. He was chasing legacy. Roth was chasing attention. Even during their rise, the tension was obvious. Eddie once said some people care more about their hair than their harmonics. He didn't name names, but the message landed. By the time they recorded 1984, it was all business, no brotherhood. Eddie built a home studio to push creative boundaries. Roth refused to track there, dismissing it completely. A sandbox for nerds. That's how Roth described it. To Eddie, that wasn't just disrespect, it was ignorance.
We're having a career difference here. We're having a musical difference. And we're going to go our own ways. And we cried and we hugged and he split. And 2 weeks later, I'm reading in Rolling Stone what an asshole I am.
When Roth left in 1985, Eddie didn't flinch. He brought in Sammy Hagar and reshaped the sound. Cleaner, heavier, more focused. Roth went solo. Eddie locked the studio door. Years later, they tried to reunite, but nothing had changed. Roth was still putting on a show. Eddie just wanted to make music. It felt forced, like dragging out an old costume that never fit right. They had chemistry, they had history, but they never had alignment. Roth thrived on chaos, Eddie thrived on craft, and when the noise stopped, only one of them had built something that could still stand. Number 2. Gene Simmons. At first, Gene Simmons looked like an ally. He helped Van Halen cut their first demo, even flew them to New York. But Eddie Van Halen didn't see it as generosity. He saw it as control. Gene didn't just lend a hand, he tried to take the wheel. I discovered Van Halen. Without me, they wouldn't have had a shot. To Eddie, that wasn't just wrong, it was insulting. He believed the band earned everything through their sound, not through favors. Years later, Eddie made it clear he didn't owe Gene anything. The tension built quietly. Simmons kept inserting himself into the band's early story. He wasn't just promoting Van Halen, he was promoting his part in Van Halen. Gene tried to steer the ship before we even had a wheel, but it didn't stop there. Simmons reportedly pushed for David Lee Roth to be replaced, and according to insiders, he suggested himself as the replacement. That idea didn't just frustrate Eddie, it sealed the distance between them.
I discovered Van Halen.
Where did you discover them?
At the Starwood. They were opening up for a group called The Boys, who I was really there to see.
After Van Halen exploded, Simmons continued telling his version, in interviews, in books, on stage, but Eddie didn't fire back. He stayed quiet. And that silence wasn't indifference, it was rejection. Years later, when asked about people trying to take credit, Eddie dropped a line that said everything. "I didn't need anyone claiming they made us. We made the music." That was the line. For Eddie, it was never about who helped. It was about who built. Gene told stories, Eddie told solos, and history remembers the difference. Number 3, Michael Anthony. They played side by side for decades. Michael Anthony was there for the early days, the rise, the chaos, the arena tours. But when things fell apart, Eddie Van Halen didn't hold back. Because for all the years they spent together, Eddie didn't think Michael earned it. Every note Mike ever played, I had to show him how to play. That line wasn't just critical, it cut deep. Michael wasn't flashy, but fans loved him. His background vocals helped define Van Halen's sound. His bass lines were solid, reliable. But to Eddie, reliable wasn't enough. Over the years, resentment grew. Eddie said Michael sold Van Halen branded hot sauce without permission, that he used the band name to promote his own products after the split. To Eddie, it felt like betrayal. "My son plays circles around him. Why should I let someone ride the name who didn't do the work?" Eddie replaced Michael with his own son, Wolfgang, in 2006. And while fans were shocked, Eddie made it clear he didn't see it as a downgrade. He saw it as an upgrade.
I'll ask him how to play something, and then he just proceeds to be Eddie Van Halen. And that's a very tough bar to reach as a beginner.
To Michael's credit, he rarely fired back. He stayed quiet, kept touring with Sammy Hagar, and avoided drama. But Eddie kept the door closed. The biggest insult came during the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Michael showed up. Eddie didn't. "I don't want to be fake and stand next to people I don't believe in anymore." That summed it up. Eddie wasn't interested in nostalgia. He wanted loyalty. And to him, Michael had crossed that line. They once stood together on the same stage, same songs, same dream. But in Eddie's eyes, that was ancient history. Because in the end, it didn't matter how long you'd been there. If you lost his trust, you were already gone. Number 4, Sammy Hagar. When David Lee Roth walked out, Sammy Hagar walked in. And for a while, it worked. The records were big, the tours were bigger, but even during the highs, Eddie Van Halen had doubts. He didn't question Sammy's talent, he questioned his loyalty. Sammy's not a band guy, he's a solo act playing backup to himself. That was Eddie's view. Hagar was always looking out for Hagar. While Eddie was buried in the music, Sammy was making business moves. The tequila brand, the side projects, it all felt like a distraction. By the Balance era, things were off. Eddie's health was declining, tensions were growing. Sammy, according to Eddie, wasn't present anymore. He was splitting time between the band and his growing empire in Cabo.
And that is it. If you think we're going on tour in the summer, forget it.
The breaking point came during the Twister soundtrack sessions. There was confusion, miscommunication, and Eddie felt like he was the only one still fully locked in. He cared more about Cabo than the music. Their 1996 split wasn't clean. Sammy said he was blindsided. Eddie said Sammy had one foot out the door for years. Either way, the door slammed shut, and hard. They briefly reunited in 2004, but it didn't last. Eddie was going through personal issues, but he still felt that Sammy was treating the band like a gig, not a family. He was never really one of us, he was just passing through. Sammy later released a memoir that didn't hold back. Eddie didn't respond in public but privately. He was hurt and furious. Friends said he considered the book a betrayal. To Eddie, Van Halen was sacred, not a brand, not a stepping stone, and when someone treated it like anything less, they were already out. Number 5. Fred Durst. It was supposed to be a casual jam session. Wes Borland had just left Limp Bizkit, and somehow Eddie Van Halen and Fred Durst ended up in the same room. But the second Eddie walked out, he knew he wasn't going back. Because to Eddie, Fred Durst wasn't just loud, he was the exact kind of person Eddie avoided his entire life. That guy's the dumbest person I've ever met. Those words weren't said on stage, they came from Eddie directly during a conversation with Limp Bizkit's manager, and he meant it. According to those involved, the jam session was a disaster. Eddie showed up expecting music, Durst showed up with weed, chaos, and random people. Eddie left mid-session and vanished.
Hey, man. Hey, let me ask you a personal question.
The story could have ended there. But the aftermath was something else. A day later, Eddie reportedly pulled up to Durst's house in an assault vehicle he had bought at a military auction, allegedly holding a rifle. According to reports, he demanded his gear back without saying a word. No threats, no shouting, just silence, and a very clear message. You don't disrespect the music. Eddie never commented publicly about the incident, but those close to him said he never wanted to hear the name Fred Durst again. He thought Limp Bizkit stood for everything wrong with modern rock, style over substance, attitude over skill. It was like showing up to a kindergarten when you thought you were walking into a recording studio. To Eddie, music was sacred. It required focus, talent, and respect. That night, he got none of it. Fred Durst thought it was just another day in the scene. Eddie saw it as a complete violation of what music should be, and once that line was crossed, he never looked back. Number 6. Yngwie Malmsteen. Eddie Van Halen rarely named names, but when he talked about guitar players who left him cold, the message pointed in one direction: Yngwie Malmsteen. Malmsteen had speed, technique, a classical touch, but Eddie didn't care how fast you played if it didn't make people feel something. It's like someone practicing scales for 2 hours straight and calling it music. Eddie never said it directly, but insiders knew who he meant. Whenever he critiqued players who were all flash, no soul, the implication was clear. Eddie's guitar playing had grit. He used harmonics like punctuation. He built guitars just to bend sound. Yngwie, on the other hand, played like a perfectionist. That disconnect? It mattered to Eddie. He didn't see Yngwie as someone pushing music forward. He saw a technician, not an innovator. There's a difference between playing fast and playing real. To Eddie, music had to breathe. Every bend, every pause, it had to mean something. And when asked about modern shredders, Eddie didn't hesitate. If you're just trying to impress other guitarists, you've already lost the audience. Eddie wasn't trying to be diplomatic. He just believed music wasn't about being precise, it was about being human. Yngwie inspired many, but to Eddie, it wasn't about speed, it was about soul, and if your playing didn't move people, it didn't move him either. Eddie Van Halen didn't storm out, he didn't throw insults, he just lowered the volume, and cut you out like a bad frequency. Once that trust was gone, you weren't getting back in, not with time, not with talent, not even with a legacy. Some burned that bridge loud, others didn't even realize the silence meant they were done. But these 6? Eddie had already made up his mind. He heard everything, and forgot nothing. So who else do you think might have ended up on Eddie's silent blacklist, or maybe barely missed it? Drop your guess in the comments, and if you want early access to the next deep dive into backstage legends, lost grudges, and rock and roll ghosts, hit like, subscribe, and unlock the member-only vault. Because in Eddie's world, it wasn't about the noise you made, it was about what you left behind when it stopped playing. And for most of them, it stopped cold.